Hello and welcome to Upside Down Church for this month. We are talking today about border ministry, and we're meeting with Seth Clark, who is a good friend and colleague of Matt Hambrick, who is our colleague in ministry here with our cooperative parish. And so I'm going to invite Matt to kind of lead us through this conversation and talking about border ministry, the challenges, of course, that are coming up now, and also what's been going on and what we're looking at happening in the future, and most importantly, how we can be a part of it and help. Matt, take it away.
Excellent. So thank you so much for being with us, Seth. Thank you for sharing your
Yeah.
experience with us.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about how you got involved with Border Church in the first place.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. So I grew up on we're starting way back. I grew up on a different border, right? Not right on the border, but I grew up in Minnesota, which for those who are not so interested in geography, it butts up against Canada, right? I remember being young and being in a boat because everyone's in a boat in Minnesota and on Lake of the Woods, which is about as far north as you can get in the continental United States. We'd be with friends and we would zig and when we would zag. When we would zig, we'd be in the US. When we would zag, we'd be in Canada. And nobody seemed to care at all. Fast forward a few years, I married my wife, a Mexican American, and her mom grew up a little bit south of the Tucson border in this little village called Imuris in Sonora, Mexico. And so by marrying into that family, I became involved with a very different kind of border reality, right? And that same marriage also brought me to San Diego, where my wife is from, and as well, that's part of this U.S. Mexico border and what's happening there. And so, little by little, my heart and my mind was drawn towards what's happening on the southern border of San Diego, California, and the U.S. And it just so happened I also got to be more and more involved working with John Fanistel, a United Methodist pastor, who was an advocate for this place called Friendship Park. And part of his advocacy work was to have a Sunday afternoon communion service. By the time I got involved, Friendship Park was closed except for on Saturdays and Sundays for 4 hours each day. And so they're closed at 2 p.m. on Sundays, the Border Patrol would. And sometimes they wouldn't actually close then, they would close a little early. And if you know anything about vulnerable people, sometimes they don't feel too at ease to speak up for themselves. And so John and some others decided, you know what? They're going to mess with these families, they're going to mess with the church. And so, as a sort of closing ceremony to the weekend at Friendship Park, he instituted a weekly practice of communion, something that had happened several times before, many times before, even. But it became a weekly thing, which we now call the Border Church. So I got involved about 6 years after that started around 2011. I got involved pretty heavily in 2017, just picking up when John wasn't able to and others weren't able to. So I'm an American Baptist pastor. And so it's a pretty ecumenical, pretty fun group that over the years has gone down to preside over the communion service. Yeah, and little by little, I just got more and more involved, writing a doctor of ministry thesis on it, writing a book on it called Church at the Wall through Judson Press, and just really getting involved as much as I could with ministry, a main ministry in National City and family and schooling and everything else, but as much as I could be involved to the point that when John decided to step back from the ministry, uh, he and I decided it was a good idea for me to kind of take up the mantle. And so I've been doing that for almost 3 years now, leading this little thing we call Border Church.
So the last time I went, I was pastoring Trinity San Diego in North Park. I think
Yeah.
it's been about um, probably 2019. It's been a long while, or
Mhm.
early 2020 before the pandemic. I'm not exactly sure, but when I went, we had to park our cars outside of um, whatever that reserve is called outside of Friendship Park, and then walk in like what, a mile and a quarter into Friendship Park in time to come do communion as that closing ceremony. The next time, or the very last time I went, I took my people from Trinity San Diego, and we went on the Mexican border side of things, and
Mhm.
it was a pretty stark contrast. Where on the American side, it was very much like behind your picture with the bars and kind of like prison style, like walking into a giant prison cell with everyone there.
Yeah.
On the Mexican border side of things, it was wide open. Everyone's playing music. It's like a beach environment. There's vendors. It's like a family atmosphere. Very
Mhm.
different. Um, but it's my understanding that it's completely different from that now on both sides. Can you share a little bit about what's shifted?
Yeah. So on February 9th, 2020, which is a date I remember because it is my wife's birthday. So it's good to remember that date. But on that day, um, things changed radically on the US side. And if you recall, COVID lockdowns didn't happen until about a month later. So there had been floodings and water issues, and there's an ongoing ecological crisis in the Tijuana River Valley, which is on both sides of the border. Uh, and it used to be if there was flooding at Borderfield State Park, that state park you walk through, Matt, that rangers would say, all right, don't get too wet. But by about 2018, 2019, because people were getting sick, I presume that's why, they started closing pedestrian access as well. In the summer, you could drive up easily, real nice. But during the rains, you could walk. And then it became that during the bad rains, when you would actually get pretty wet in the puddles and the flowing river and whatnot, they would just close everything down. So that's what happened on that fateful day, February 9th, 2020. Our good friend Maria Teresa, who's been a photo documentarian of Friendship Park for over 20 years, actually probably more than a quarter century now. She was there on the inside already, right? I had services in the morning, so I was just coming from there, but she was inside doing pictures most of the day. And I call her and I say, the ranger's not letting me in because it's raining. And she said, I'm already here. Can't you come? But I couldn't come. And the next week I couldn't go. And the next week I couldn't go. And the next week I couldn't go. And so there's been no consistent opening of Friendship Park in now over half a decade on the US side, right? Because what happened in March 2020, COVID lockdowns, right? On both sides, things were closed on both sides. We'd meet on Zoom, people would meet outside in the Mexico side, which they'd been doing already. So that wasn't too tough of a transition. But on the US side, kept out, kept out, kept out. And we were under the assumption, because it was basically intimated at that when Borderfield State Park reopened, Friendship Park, which is on US federal property, an enforcement zone for border policies, we were under the assumption that it was going to reopen too. And it wasn't, right? They did not reopen that secondary fence, that gate, when Borderfield State Park opened. So sometimes we'd be able to walk up on the mesa top and be with friends through technology at about 100 yards away and call them. And they have a big sound system over there, that party like atmosphere you mentioned, right? Lots of families, lots of music, lots of fun. They're able to get some amplification. We can hear ourselves, we can hear them. That's great. Except for then we got removed even further because Borderfield State Park hasn't been open since a tropical storm hit Mexico and Southern California in August 2023. So now it's a year and a half that we haven't been able to see our friends through the fence at all. And around that same time, it went from 18-foot walls, which was why the Friends of Friendship Park started their activism to begin with, to try to stop the 18-foot walls in the George W. Bush years. Well, it changed to 30-foot walls, first in the Trump years, and then eventually coming to Friendship Park during the Joseph Biden administration. Yeah, so things have changed a lot, Matt, since you came down somewhat frequently, and in a lot of ways, not for the better. I guess if there is a silver lining, it's that in October 2023, on the US side, we were able to move our Sunday communion service, keep the same time of 1:30, and just move it to this place called Whiskey 8, which is an open air detention site where asylum seekers and migrants have been kept between the border walls, awaiting pickup. And a solidarity station, a place where food and water and a little bit of first aid, clothes, blankets, whatever people might need as a kind of humanitarian triage, I guess you could call it. This solidarity station had been up for a little bit in spring of 2023 and then has been up ever since October 2023. And it just made sense to offer something spiritually nourishing as well. And so we've been there since then. With the new administration, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we're hopeful that there can still be a presence at the border on both sides and until there's a radical transformation of that border.
So is this through a wall at Whiskey 8 with the no one's land?
Yeah, so the wall looks very similar to the one behind me, a big bollard style wall, 30 feet high. Um, Behind me in this photo, if those who are watching, it's there's some metal mesh so you can't pass anything through anymore. That's right at Friendship Park. Where we meet at Whiskey 8, there's the wall, but there's no mesh. The people that we're ministering to and serving are technically on US soil. And so anything we hand to them is not any sort of it's not going across a border, right? And so there's these gigantic fences, the walls, monstrosities, but you can pass simple items through.
Are people on the Mexican side of the border able to pass things through?
No, because at Friendship Park, there is that mesh.
Yeah.
And then at Whiskey, excuse me, at Whiskey 8, on the Mexico side is one of the busiest roads in all of Tijuana, the road that goes from downtown to Playas, the beach. And not only that, they're currently building another highway on top of that, a limited access tollway that's going to go from, I think, the airports to downtown to Playas and then down Highway 1 all the way down to Rosarito and Ensenada. And so that's a massive undertaking. So the only people we really see on the Mexico side, several hundred feet away, our National Guard who are posted there, Mexican National Guard. And then usually some workers and lots of cars. Once in a while, we'll see some people right up against the wall. And it's somewhat hard to ascertain what they're doing. But yeah, that's very infrequent. Typically, those folks are on that side are just going to work, going home, going to the beach.
Yeah.
In cars.
So when I've taken people to come and visit, I haven't obviously taken them to the current configuration, but when I've taken people, whether it was on Friendship Park or on the Mexico side of things, no matter what perspective they came in with, they basically always came away from it going, we've got to do something. Like it captured their imagination in such a way, we've got to do something. And the something was always a little bit different, person to person. But I'm wondering if you can talk about what it is about this that captures people's imaginations like that.
Yeah. Well, everyone has their own experience, right? But I can highlight some experiences from this very weekend that just passed. I had a group of American Baptist executive ministers come down, regional executive ministers, which is kind of like a bishop, right? Bishop without any power. That's what they would say. But they came down and we had some grant money to host them, and it was just this wonderful time. They were all over Tijuana, seeing the different shelters, the different places where people are doing wonderful work. Right. On Sunday afternoon, after visiting Casa de Luz, which is a local LGBTQ shelter that provides food for lunch after Border Church, right? So right after that, So they're already primed to have hearts wide open. They came to this border church service, in the afternoon, and started at 1:30. And Guillermo, my colleague on the Mexico side, he's so good at being hospitable and inviting people in. And so he invited them all in different ways. He had one of the ministers preach. He had another one translate into Spanish. He had others help serve communion. And so everyone was integrated in this unique way. And so I think that's part of it is when you are there, you feel like you are part of something, right? You're seeing something, you are physically present in a place that is unique and wondrous, even as it is terrible, uniquely terrible. I think that's part of it. Part of it too is just the way in which the communion and the words of scripture um, feel a little bit more salient when they are shared, right? We have these sacramental things happening, not inside of a church, as beautiful as many churches are, but in a place that is open to the sky. There's usually a good view of the ocean if you're at Friendship Park. Sometimes we've had dolphins come and pray with us, right? As they swim by, right? There's just this sense of beauty and wonder there, and community as well, especially in the Mexico side. So there's all of these things, all of these deep feelings and experiences. And then, like my friends who came on Sunday, you move to the wall in a spirit of confession, and there's a group confession, and you put your hands on this ugly symbol of sin, right? And I had one friend who was there on Sunday, and she said that was life transforming. That started a new chapter in my spiritual journey, the placing of my hands on this wall, right? She had read my book. She had been following the Border Church Facebook page for a long time and following me as I chat about it online or whatever. But being there, putting her hands on the wall, she was transformed. Right. And so I think there are those confluences of moments and people and place and nature and whatever God's doing in this mysterious way that make it pretty special and make people there, like your groups, want to respond, want to do better, to do something, to alleviate the suffering, to raise the prophetic voice, to show love.
One thing that stands out for me that seems to happen a lot. It didn't see when I talked to John, or maybe it was you. I can't remember exactly who about it. You weren't surprised because I met people at Friendship Park who had not seen their family other than through that fence
Yeah,
decades.
decades. Yeah,
That was the only opportunity for them to see each other, and now it sounds like they basically don't have that as an option.
correct. Yeah, there's no kind of sanctioned place. There may be some unsanctioned places that I can neither confirm nor deny, but there's no sanctioned place anymore on the entire U.S. Mexico border that I know of, at least, where families can meet, where friends of long ago can rekindle their friendship. There's nothing like that now. And that's a huge loss, not just for me, although I like it because I get to worship there and see friends on the other side. And not just for the San Diego Tijuana region, because there's a lot of people on both sides, many of whom are perfectly, quote unquote legal, right? They have the right papers, but those right papers don't allow them to cross. If you have certain visas, you can't go back to Mexico, or if you don't have the right visa, you can't come to the U.S., right? And so migration certainly part of the picture, but it's more than that, of course. But as well, like you were saying, people haven't seen each other for years, for decades. People who live in very, very far away places. Like we've met people from Seattle, Washington, from New Jersey, from Pueblo, from Oaxaca. Like these are far away places. They spend months and months of salary to make a visit to San Diego and Tijuana. And even after the closure, people were still making the journey, not knowing, not knowing what was coming for them, which was a closed gate. And so I remember, especially earlier on, when you could still get to the Mesa top, Monument Mesa, right? The border monument. You could still get to the Mesa top. You could still see your family about 100 yards away. But you couldn't have that face-to-face conversation that you were expecting, that you spent hundreds or thousands of dollars to achieve. Right? The heartbreak that went with that, the tears, the wailing. It was visceral. And I imagine there are people we don't even know about now because they probably go to Borderfield State Park, which is closed. They see a gate, they see a sign that says, do not go any further. You might get a ticket, all of those things, right? In English and Spanish, it says, you better stop here. You're not allowed. And so they don't even have the chance to see from 100 yards away any longer. They can only do what they've done this whole time, which is call and say, Abuela, Mama, I can't come. I can't come see you.
You can only imagine the tears of that scenario, or
Yeah.
I can only imagine because you've seen it yourself.
Yeah.
I can't help but take away how important this has been to numerous people to be able to see their family through this border wall and not to have it is a devastating loss. I can only imagine that people are trying to sneak into the area and risk the ticket, maybe even.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine there are some. And it's a lot easier to get into the state park than it is to get into the federal property. But even from the state park, you might get a ticket from a state park ranger. But I think that's not uncommon to try to get out there anyway and at least wave from far away.
So it sounds like it's not as ritualized for churches who are involved in this ministry. How do they find out what to do if they want to be involved on a Sunday?
Well, great question. There's of course a website, right? Borderchurch.org, where they know someone who knows someone, or they know me, and I say, hey, why don't you come down? You can come on the US side, you can go on the Mexico side. Maybe you should try both because they're so radically different, right? And there's also a Facebook site, facebook.com/border church, where there's a live of the Mexico side every Sunday at 1:30. So there are those ways to kind of enter in. I have a weekly newsletter where I share a thought on scripture and how it applies to the border. You can email me. That's SethDavidClark@gmail.com if you want to do that. And yeah, there's the Border Church website on the page here. But yeah, that talks a little bit about what we're up to, what we're doing. Talks a little bit how to get involved in terms of coming or sending a message or what to pray for or how to give financially. And for us, in terms of connection, right? The biggest thing is come down if you can. Not everyone can come down. Not everyone's in Southern California or Arizona or, has the time to drive down because especially if you're a church going type person, you might have something going on Sunday. So it takes a little extra effort. At the same time, it's probably worth putting that extra effort in, right? So we call it the 4 P's of participation. I'm a Baptist, so I have to alliterate, right? So the 4 P's of participation, right? And the first one, of course, is presence, right? Presence, be there, show up. The second one is prayer, right? Anyone can pray. You don't have to be nearby. You don't have to be far away. Anyone can pray. The third one is, and this one I chuckle when I say it, is pesos, right? Pesos, right? You can give financially, right? And then the fourth one is prophetic witness, right? I think whenever I'm at the border, I have this feeling, right? It's a feeling of come and see, go and tell, right? That same feeling that your groups were experiencing, Matt. I got to do something. Part of that is just bearing witness. What does it mean to prophesy about what happened, right? And prophecy looks very different ways at very different times with very different people, right? But in the sense of social justice, right? What does it mean to speak truth to power and speak truth about a higher power? So those are the four P's, right? Presence, prayer, pesos, and prophetic witness.
You add service into that, and you have our membership vows for the United Methodist Church: prayers, presence, gift, service, witness. And I
Exactly.
really appreciate the focus on witness there, the prophetic witness there, because it's like Matt was saying, I come in and see this, and I want to do something. I want to have something happen with this, and what can we do? So, recognizing the current setting that we're in right now, what kind of witness can be made? What power can be done?
Yeah.
So we're three pastors. I think we got to get into some theology at some point, right?
Mm,
Not that everything isn't that we've been talking about isn't theological. I'm struck by that perhaps there may be churches that are struggling on how to talk about immigration.
right.
Because I think if you take the spectrum of thought around immigration in the US, you're going to find Christians at every part of that conversation. And I'm wondering how you have been talking, how you talk about it, or how do you communicate it with a uh, you are kind of ecumenical. You have several denominations involved. You have different kinds of Christian kind of people coming all the time. How do you
Mhm.
navigate what is, frankly, for many, a risky conversation?
Mm, yeah. I think if we are thinking theologically, the there's two concepts that come up which are robust theologically, but also in some sense simple. I think they're simple enough for people to understand if whether or not they've gone to seminary or read all the books, right? So the first one is God's love, right? The great commandment, love God with basically your whole being, right? And then love your neighbor as yourself, right? So if that person is standing right in front of you, whether or not there's a fence in between you, a border in between you, a language barrier in between you, that person, from my reading, that person is a worthy candidate of love because they are your neighbor, right? And if you want to take it another step further, right? They are a neighbor made in the image and likeness of God. And so if you want to say, I love God, you might want to love the people who are made in the image and likeness of God. So that's the first one, that love piece, right? And then the second one is, how do we, as people under God's love, practice unity in places of division? It's very obvious, very striking, the dividing line of the US Mexico border. At the same time, there are lots of divisions. There are lots of divisions, right? I often preach and pray about God tearing down and us, we tearing down the border walls in our own hearts, because that's where it starts. And so, how do we engage in that? And sometimes that includes the political barriers that we're seeing in churches and denominations and across the world. Sometimes that includes things that more traditionally we think of as separating issues. Sometimes it's just, I don't like this guy. He's a jerk. We've all had that, right? If you've been around ministry for more than a week, you've probably had that. So yeah, unity in the place of division and God's love, and how do we share it? I think those are my two starting points almost always with this. Right? One of the values we have is being transformed, right? And actually one of the chapters in the book Church at the Wall that I wrote about the border church. I'm not much of a poet, but I basically wrote like an autobiographical poem. And it was about that value. It's about what it means to be transformed by encountering God at the wall. And I think there's something to be said for shaking up our day-to-day, week-to-week experiences in order to find that transformation. Yes, it's a practice of the holiness day in and day out with prayer, meditation, service, all those things, right? And if we get stuck in our routine fully, maybe we're not uh, letting God move as much as we might otherwise. So whether or not it's at the border or a women's health clinic or a homeless shelter for unhoused persons, right? I think it's time to shake ourselves up because even conservatives, I was a conservative for a very long time and I was transformed and wanted to love God more and love people more every time I had one of those engagements. Sometimes I left angry or sad or whatever, but I knew there was a there that was worth exploring more. Like God's doing something here. God is doing something here, right? The chips are down. The chips are down. We are not in a place that I was hoping to be in. And yet, every week there is something significant, something spiritual, something holy that happens through this ministry. And so it's worth talking about. It's worth knowing more about. It's worth, like I said, coming down if you can and being transformed for yourself.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I know this will lead into discussion. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Uh, God bless you as you make this journey in this Lenten season, as you are sojourners, as you are strangers in this strange land, and as you recognize that our home together is with God by the grace of Jesus Christ, our Savior, in whom we gather and meet and love and share. Thanks be to God.